Hello there YouTube, allow me to begin this video with an apology to everyone who has contacted me via text or email or personal message on YouTube of late, whom I haven't responded to yet. I must admit I've allowed my correspondence to be somewhat neglected of late because of various distractions and pressures out here in the real world. I will be getting back to you at some point and via some means, so please don't think that I'm ignoring you. I really am not. The reason I'm making this video is because it seems that an old topic seems to have resurfaced. It's become vogue once again on YouTube, and that is the subject of homophobia. Now, as far as I'm concerned, homophobia is just like any other prejudice, really, and it's as ill-conceived. The thing that bothers me about many of the homophobes on YouTube, most of them I can cope with because they're just idiots. It's a matter of I just don't like homosexuals, which is, yeah, at the very least they're being honest in that. The ones that concern me are the ones that obfuscate the matter and try to enshroud it within some intellectual legitimacy. And the one thing they always come down to, the one protest that they throw up in order to legitimize their prejudice, is the matter of choice. Homosexuality, they proclaim, is a matter of choice. And I find this a very bizarre claim to make, particularly as a defense for holding a prejudicial position, because insofar as I'm concerned, you can allow them that assumption and it still doesn't legitimize their position. It's something you can take away from them and let it smack them in the face. Consider, let's assume for the moment that homosexuality is indeed exclusively a matter of conscious choice. The reaction of any reasonable person should be, so what? How does that make your prejudice against people who practice homosexual behaviour any more legitimate? In rational terms, homosexuality, the practice of homosexual behaviour, has absolutely no application or consequence for anyone other than those who engage in said behaviour. Therefore, it is no one else's business. And I can only assume the only reason those who hold a prejudice against homosexuals do is for the same reasons that people hold prejudices against people of different ethnic origins or of different cultures or religions or whatever. It's a matter of tribal self-definition. It's this weakness of self-definition, this lack of it, and this requirement for an enemy, a perceived enemy, a threat. These people belong to a different tribe that is inferior to my own and which is a threat to my own. Therefore, they are the enemy. And I must say, it comes off as weak and pathetic more than anything. Now, I want to qualify that, speaking as a man who is bisexual, who has profound homosexual tendencies, and is currently engaged in a wonderful, wonderful relationship with a homosexual man, a beautiful, beautiful man. Now you know why I'm distracted from my correspondence, by the way, and from YouTube, for that matter. It's fairly clear that sexuality is not a matter of choice, but that is, of course, by the by, and anecdotal and entirely subjective, not good enough in a scientific arena, but of course that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter with regards to the legitimacy of the prejudice, and the attempt to make it so by homophobes is, to my mind, a deliberate and scurrilous obfuscation of the root of the real issue. And the real issue is the prejudice legitimate, or can prejudice, preconception and prejudgment of human beings based on choices they make and the consequent behaviours that have no effect on anyone but those making the choices and engaging in the behaviours, can that prejudice ever be legitimate? And I think the answer from any rational human being has to be no. It is no different. Let's assume, again, that one's sexuality is a matter of conscious choice. One chooses to be attracted to either women or to men or to both or whatever. Let's assume that. Let's give them that assumption, theoretically for the time being. In order to legitimize a negative opinion of those who have made a different choice from them, they must qualify in very rational terms, and quantify for that matter, how the choice to engage in homosexual behaviour affects them or affects other people negatively. And thus far they fail to do that. They fail to do it so profoundly that they have to make up nonsense. As was seen throughout the pro-Prop 8 agenda. They actually have to lie, consciously lie and distort the truth in order to legitimize the prejudice in their own minds. There was nonsense such as, for example, that churches would be forced to perform homosexual marriages, which is absolute nonsense. Churches have never, ever, ever been forced, particularly not in America, to conduct any ceremony that they didn't want to. They would be no more obliged to perform homosexual marriages than they would be to perform marriages between people of different religions or of no religion or whatever. It's absolutely absurd. And the fact that they have to lie in this manner demonstrates just how weak their position actually is. But coming back to this notion of choice, basing one's prejudice on choices that are made by other people and behaviours that do not affect oneself is like having a prejudice against someone for choosing to have a different coloured car to you, or against people who choose to ride bicycles instead of cars, or cars instead of bicycles. In fact, there are choices that human beings make every day that have quantifiably more negative consequences for humanity as a whole and for other human beings that are far more profound than any consequences than the apparent choice to engage in homosexual activity is. For example, people who choose to drive cars. Cars are, statistically speaking, quite dangerous things. The minute you get in the car, there is a chance that you could crash, that it could malfunction, that it could hit someone, and so on and so forth. Therefore, morally speaking, and in perfectly rational terms, the choice to drive a car is infinitely more immoral than the choice to engage in homosexual behaviour. Let's take it further. Let's make some more assumptions, shall we? Let's assume, right, that human beings had the capacity to consciously alter the skin pigmentation so that they could be any colour they wanted. Let's assume that. Let's assume that there was a subset, a subculture of human beings who chose to be green because they liked it. It appealed to them somehow. It made them feel good as human beings. Obviously, this choice would have no consequences for anyone other than those human beings. But now let's assume that that subculture is quite small. Let's assume that it's about 10% of the population. And let's assume that there are portions of wider society who choose more standard or mainstream skin pigmentations, who decide that they dislike the green people for no other reason that they've chosen something that's not popular. Let's assume that. Would their prejudice be legitimate? Because insofar as I can see, this situation is completely analogous to the situation that homophobes create when they proclaim that homosexuality is a choice. You can allow them the assumption and their prejudice is still nonsensical. And all of the bullshit that goes with it, the deliberate distortion of scientific research and the misrepresentation of philosophy, etc., etc., and that is part and parcel of the homophobes' arsenal, it seems, becomes exposed as simple obfuscation of an attempt to muddy the waters and draw focus away from the very bones of the issue. And the very bones of the issue is this prejudice legitimate, even given the assumptions they try to make? And of course the answer is no. By any rational terms, no, it is not.